I used to believe my best friend had the perfect life, success came easily to him, while I struggled every day. I compared myself, I felt left behind. Then one conversation changed everything. What I discovered made me ashamed of my thoughts, and it completely changed how I see people, and how I see myself. My name is Ethan Reed. I grew up in a quiet town in Oregon, with wet mornings and slow roads. I had one close friend, Logan Brooks. He was the kind of guy teachers remembered, coaches loved him, strangers smiled at him, he talked like the world listened, he walked like the floor carried him, and I watched all of it. At first I told myself it was normal, friends compare, friends compete, but the truth was sharper. I envied him. Logan got the lead in the school play, I was a tree in the background. Logan got the internship downtown, I got the polite rejection email. Logan bought a used car at 19, I still borrowed my sister's. Logan posted photos with a bright caption, and my stomach tightened. People said he was lucky, people said he was gifted, people said he had an easy life, and I nodded. Because that story made my own struggle feel less personal, I started measuring my days against his. I counted his wins like they were losses for me. When he laughed, I wondered what he was laughing at. When he succeeded, I searched for the secret shortcut. And when he tried to be kind, I acted like it was pity. I hated that version of myself, but I kept feeding it. After college, we moved to Seattle, same city, different worlds. Logan joined a fast-growing company. I bounced between contract jobs, design work 1 month, support tickets the next. I told everyone I was exploring options, but inside I was keeping score. I followed his updates, promotions, conferences, the shiny badge on his profile. One night at a rooftop party I heard someone say, "Logan always lands on his feet, like he is floating." I laughed too, a small laugh, the kind that hides a bruise. Later I stood alone by the elevator. I looked at my reflection in the chrome door, and I thought, what is wrong with me? I wanted to be happy for him, yet I kept feeling small, I kept feeling cheated, I kept feeling invisible, and that night I decided I needed distance. I told myself it would be healthy, I told myself it would be mature, so I stopped replying fast, I skipped invitations, I muted his social posts, I turned our friendship into a polite holiday message, and I told myself I felt relief, but the truth was I felt empty. Then, on a gray Tuesday in March, I got a message from Logan, simple words, "Hey man, can we talk? I could use a friend." I stared at the screen for a long time. My first reaction was annoyance, because even his problems felt like interruptions. But something in that line, "I could use a friend," sounded heavy, it sounded different. I typed, "Sure, where?" And he sent an address I did not recognize, a low building near the river, not a cafe, not an office, and I felt a small unease, like the ground had shifted. That is where the story changed for me. I drove there after work, rain tapping the windshield. I rehearsed my old thoughts. Maybe he wants advice, maybe he wants a favor, maybe he wants to celebrate another win. And I felt my jaw tighten. Then I remembered our childhood bikes, the dusty summer trails, the way he once waited for me when my chain broke, and I wondered when I stopped seeing that boy, when I replaced him with a scoreboard. The building was plain, beige walls, a small sign with a simple logo. Inside it smelled like soap and warm tea. A receptionist looked up and smiled. She said, "You must be Ethan, Logan is in the back." I followed a hallway with photos on the wall, smiling families, kids holding drawings, older folks in soft blankets. It felt like a clinic, but gentler, like a community place. Logan stood by a door, not in his usual crisp jacket, just a gray hoodie, hair messy, eyes tired. He hugged me fast, and I felt how tense his shoulders were. He said, "Thanks for coming. I know I have been hard to reach," and I almost laughed, because that was my line. We walked into a small room with chairs, a kettle, a stack of paperwork. He poured tea with hands that shook a little. I pretended not to see it. For a moment we sat in silence. Rain whispered against the window. Then he said, "I need to tell you something, and I need you to hear it without judging me." I nodded, still half annoyed, still half curious. He took a slow breath, like he was stepping into cold water. He said, "You remember my mom, Claire, the one who made pancakes shaped like stars?" I said, "Of course, she was the fun mom on our street." Logan looked down at his cup, and he said, "She has been sick for a long time, longer than I ever admitted to anyone. Not the kind of sick you see in 1 week, the kind that changes year by year." He said some mornings she cannot stand without help, some days her mind gets foggy, some nights she wakes up scared. I felt my stomach drop, because I had never heard any of this, not once. He kept talking, words spilling out. He said, "My dad left when I was 16, it was quiet at first, then it was final, and after that I became the adult in the house. I learned bills, insurance calls, driving to appointments, cooking, cleaning." He said, "I promised myself no one would look at her like a burden, so I carried it. I carried all of it." I stared at him, and I realized I had built a whole story about His easy life, and it had missing chapters. He rubbed his forehead, and he said, "The reason we are here is because she starts a new treatment plan next week, and I need to sign forms, and I need to plan for support, and I am running out of energy." I wanted to say something comforting, something wise, but my mouth felt dry. Logan gave a small crooked smile, and said, "Funny thing, people think I am fearless. I am just very practiced at acting, okay?" He glanced at me, and his eyes were wet. He said, "I invited you because I trust you, and because I feel like I might fall apart, and I can't let that happen when she needs me." The room felt smaller, my old jealousy felt childish, but I still did not fully understand. "Not yet," I asked. "Why did you never tell me?" And he said, "I did not want anyone to treat me differently," he said. "Also, I needed to believe it was temporary, like if I kept moving fast, it could not catch me." Then he stood up, and said, "Come with me, I want you to meet someone." We walked deeper into the building, past a play corner with toys, past a quiet office with a counselor talking softly, and I felt a strange shame growing, because this place felt like real life, and my envy had been aimed at an illusion. We entered a wider room with soft chairs, a few plants, a TV showing a nature scene. Logan waved to a nurse. She nodded like she knew him well. On a couch sat a woman with a knit hat, thinner than I remembered, but her smile was still that star pancake smile. Claire Brooks looked up and said, "Ethan, look at you, all grown up." I sat beside her, careful, like my movement could break something. Logan knelt to adjust her blanket. The gesture was so natural, like breathing. Claire touched his hair and said, "You look tired, honey." He joked, "Just busy, Mom, big week," and his voice was bright, but his eyes were not. I watched them, and it felt like watching a play where I had missed the first act. Claire asked about my work, my apartment, my sister. She remembered details I forgot, then her hand shook as she lifted her tea, and Logan's hand reached out to steady it before the cup wobbled. He did it without thinking, and she did not react, because this had become normal for them. The nurse came by with a clipboard. Claire's smile faded for a second. She looked at Logan like a child looks at a lighthouse. Logan read the paper, explained it in calm words, pointed to lines, made choices. When Claire had trouble finding a word, Logan filled it in gently, never rushing her, never making her feel small. My chest tightened, because I remembered my own thoughts, how I called him lucky, how I joked about his smooth path. After a while Claire grew sleepy, her eyelids heavy. She squeezed my fingers and said, "It is good you came. He needs friends." Logan stood and led me out. We walked back to the small room. He sat again, shoulders slumping, like he had been holding them up for years. He said, "I work the way I do because I have to. The salary, the health coverage, the flexibility. It is not a game for me," he said. "And there is more. There is my little brother, Noah. He is in college now. But when Mom got worse I paid his tuition," he said. "I wanted him to have one normal thing, one clean start." I swallowed, thinking of the times I assumed his travel photos meant luxury. Logan said, "I took a second remote job last year, nights and weekends. I told people it was for fun, because saying the truth felt embarrassing." He laughed once. "No humor in it," he said. "Sometimes I write code at 2 a.m. while listening for Mom to call my name." He looked at me and said, "Do you ever feel like you are running on a treadmill, and everyone else thinks you are dancing?" I nodded, because yes, but also because I did not know what else to do. He leaned back, eyes closed, and for a second he looked like a kid again, overwhelmed. Then he opened his eyes and said, "Ethan, I am not telling you this for sympathy. I am telling you because I am tired of pretending." He said, "I want you in my life, but I need it to be real." I felt heat in my face, like a spotlight, because I realized how fake I had been, how distant, how resentful, and I wanted to confess. I wanted to say, I was jealous, I was petty, I was wrong, but the words tangled, and all I managed was, "I'm here, I'm listening." Logan nodded slowly, and I understood that listening was not a small thing, not in a life like his. Outside, the rain eased, and the silence between us started to change shape. On the drive home my hands gripped the steering wheel too tight. The city lights blurred on wet asphalt, and I kept replaying every moment I had ever compared myself to him. I remembered freshman year. When he won that scholarship, I told people, "Well, he has connections." I remembered the day he bought that used car. I joked, "Must be nice." I remembered the way I pulled away when he invited me for dinner, because I assumed it would be another story about success, and now I pictured him rushing from work to a pharmacy, from a pharmacy to a late-night laptop screen, and I felt small in the worst way, not small like humble, small like mean. When I got home I did not turn on music. I sat in the dark, and I tried to locate the root of my envy. It was not only about money, it was not only about titles, it was about a fear that life had chosen favorites, and I was not one of them. I realized I had been using Logan as proof of my own failure, because that was easier than looking at my choices, and because I could not stand the idea that effort does not always equal reward. My phone buzzed, a message from Logan. "Thanks again for today." Mom smiled a lot. My throat tightened. I typed, "I'm glad, I'm here anytime." And then I stared at those words, anytime. Did I mean it? Could I mean it? Could I be the kind of friend who shows up, not just the kind who watches and judges. The next morning I went to work, my normal routine, coffee, elevator, screen, but everything looked different. When a coworker bragged about a deal, I wondered what they were hiding behind that brag. When someone complained loudly about a small inconvenience, I thought, maybe they have heavier things at home. I kept thinking of Claire's sentence, he needs friends. At lunch I searched Logan's social posts in my head, the smiling conference badge, the mountain hiking photo. I used to see them as trophies, now I saw them as oxygen, moments he stole for himself to keep going. After work I called my sister. I asked about her day, and I listened more carefully than usual. She told me about a neighbor who seemed angry all the time. She said, maybe he is just rude, and I heard myself say, maybe he is carrying something. It surprised me. That night I opened a notebook. I wrote down one line, you do not know the cost of someone's calm face. Then I wrote another line, envy is lazy curiosity. It guesses instead of learning. I slept poorly. In my dreams I was back in high school, watching Logan collect applause while I stood in shadow, but this time I could see his hands behind the curtain, gripping the rope that held the set from falling. In the morning I woke up with a decision, not dramatic, not heroic, just clear. I would stop building stories from the outside. I would ask, I would offer, I would show up, and if I was honest, I would also start showing up for myself. Because if Logan could carry so much and still be kind, then my excuses sounded thinner. I texted him, coffee this weekend on me, and he replied fast, a simple yes, thank you. And for the first time in a long time, I did not feel behind, I felt connected. We met at a small cafe near Green Lake, early Saturday, the kind of place with quiet music and warm bread. Logan arrived wearing a cap, like he was trying to be invisible. He looked around, then smiled when he saw me, tired but real. We ordered, sat by the window, and for a while we talked about ordinary things, movies, the weird weather, a new game app. Then he fell silent, staring at his cup. I decided to stop circling. I said, Logan, I need to tell you something too. He looked up, cautious. I took a breath, and I said, I have been jealous of you for years. I acted like you had an easy life. I pulled away because of it. My voice shook, not because the words were dramatic, but because they were true. I said, when people called you lucky, I believed them, and it made me bitter. Logan did not interrupt, he just listened. I said, I'm ashamed, because yesterday I saw what you have been carrying, and I realized I never asked. Not once. I expected anger. I expected him to push his chair back and leave, but he exhaled, long and slow, and he said, thanks for saying it out loud. He shrugged, and said, I could feel you drifting. I told myself you were busy, but it still hurt. He paused, then added, I was jealous of you sometimes too. I blinked, and he smiled faintly. He said, you had freedom, you could quit a job, move apartments, take a weekend trip without planning a whole support system. He said, you could fail and only disappoint yourself. That sentence hit me like cold water. Because I had treated my own freedom like nothing. Logan leaned forward and said, Ethan, I do not want you to idolize me. I also mess up, he said. I snap at Noah. I get impatient with mom. I pretend I'm fine and then I explode over small things. He rubbed his eyes and said, I live in two worlds, the professional world where I'm confident, and the home world where I'm scared. I nodded, and the cafe sounds faded. Like the world gave us space, I said. What do you need, right now? Practical, real. Logan thought, then said, honestly, I need someone who can sit with mom once a week so I can go to the gym, or just walk. He laughed under his breath, as if asking for that was selfish. I said, I can do that. I can learn what to do. You can teach me. His eyes widened a little, and I realized how rare help must feel to him. We made a plan, simple, Tuesdays. I would come by after work, bring groceries, sit with Claire, let Logan breathe. Then I said, and you can text me when you are overwhelmed. Even if it is late. He stared at me, and then he nodded, and his shoulders dropped, like he had been bracing for years. We left the cafe and walked by the lake, geese on the water, joggers passing, life looking normal. Logan said, you know what's weird? I spent so long protecting my image, that I forgot friends are not enemies. I smiled, and said, I spent so long competing, that I forgot friends are not mirrors. We laughed, quiet and honest, and that laughter felt like a bridge being rebuilt. Plank by plank. The first Tuesday I showed up at Logan's apartment I brought a bag of oranges and a carton of soup. I felt awkward, like a guest in a life that required special rules. Logan met me at the door with a quick rundown. Mom's meds are in the blue box, her favorite show starts at 7, if she gets dizzy, have her sit, call me if you were unsure. He said it calmly, but his eyes watched me, measuring if I would run. Claire was in a recliner, feet on a pillow, a blanket over her knees. She smiled, and said, Ethan, you were kind to come. I sat beside her, and we watched the show, a simple cooking competition. Between scenes she told me stories. Logan is a boy building a cardboard fort, Noah trying to teach the dog tricks. Her voice wandered sometimes, she would pause, searching for a word, and I learned to wait, not to rescue her too quickly. At one point she asked, how is your mother? And I froze. Because my mother lived 2 states away and was healthy, I realized how different our lives were. How casually I had held my safety. Claire reached for her tea, her hand trembled. I steadied it the way Logan did. She nodded like it was normal, like my hand belonged there. Logan texted me from the gym, a photo of a treadmill screen. He wrote, "I forgot how good it feels to move, thank you." I looked at that message for a long time, because it was so small and so huge. By the third week I learned the rhythms, the pauses, the sudden fatigue, the way laughter could turn into silence. I learned that caregiving is not one big dramatic moment, it is 1,000 small choices, made when you are tired. Logan came home one night looking lighter, and then, as he stepped into the kitchen, his phone rang. His smile disappeared instantly. He listened, murmured, "Yes, I understand, thank you." After he hung up he leaned against the counter, eyes closed. I asked, "Bad news?" And he said, "Insurance." They denied part of the coverage again. He did not yell, he did not cry, he just stood there, like a man holding a heavy box, adjusting his grip. In that moment I saw the real price of his calm reputation. Later, while Claire slept, Logan and I sorted paperwork at the table, dates, codes, phone numbers. I watched him move through it like a second language, and I felt respect that had nothing to do with career titles. I said, "You shouldn't have to do this alone," and he answered, "I got used to it." But getting used to something does not mean it is okay. On my walk home that night I noticed the city differently, apartment windows, silhouettes, someone washing dishes, someone rocking a baby. I thought about how every bright profile photo might sit on top of unseen nights. At work, when I felt my old jealousy rise, I pictured Logan at 2 a.m. listening for a call from the next room, and the jealousy softened into something else, a question: what is their story? What is mine? I began to take my own life more seriously. I applied for a stable role instead of drifting, not because I needed to beat Logan, but because I wanted to be reliable, for myself and for others. And each Tuesday, in that quiet apartment, my view of success kept changing shape. One evening in late April the air turned warm for the first time, cherry blossoms falling like pale snow. I arrived for my Tuesday shift, but Logan opened the door too fast. "Face tight," he said. "I'm glad you're here. Mom had a rough afternoon." Inside, Claire sat very still, eyes unfocused, breathing shallow. She tried to smile, but it slipped. Logan knelt beside her, speaking softly, asking simple questions. "What day is it? Can you squeeze my hand?" Her fingers moved weakly, and Logan's calm cracked at the edges. He looked at me and said, "Call the nurse line, please." My hands fumbled with my phone. I spoke to a calm voice who asked a list of questions. Then she said, "It would be best to get her checked tonight." Logan nodded as if he expected it, but his eyes flashed with fear. We helped Claire stand, slow, careful. We got her coat on, her shoes on. She whispered, "I'm sorry, I hate being trouble." Logan said, "You are not trouble, you are my mom," and his voice broke on the last word. We drove to an urgent care center, lights bright, chairs lined up, quiet conversations. Logan filled forms with the speed of a man who has done it too many times. I sat with Claire, I held her purse, I offered water, I watched her eyelids flutter. Every few minutes Logan glanced over, making sure she was still there, still with us. Hours passed in a strange slow motion, and I understood something. Logan's life was a constant state of readiness, like a phone that never left low battery mode. When a nurse called Claire's name, Logan stood instantly. He tried to smile at her, then turned away so she would not see his panic. I wanted to tell him, "You are allowed to be scared," but the room felt too fragile for big sentences. After the checkup the doctor spoke in careful terms: adjustments, monitoring, follow-ups. No dramatic announcement, but even small changes meant new work, new planning, new worry. We returned to the apartment close to midnight. Claire was exhausted. Logan looked hollow. While he helped her into bed he kept talking gently, like a lullaby made of instructions. Then Claire fell asleep, and Logan sat on the edge of the couch, staring at nothing. I sat beside him, and for once I did not try to fix it with advice, I just stayed. After a long silence he said, "Sometimes I imagine what it would be like to live a day without fear in the background." I said, "I used to imagine your life was like that." And my voice was quiet, almost a confession. He nodded, and said, "Everyone imagines someone else has peace." Then he surprised me. He smiled a little, and said, "But tonight was easier because you were here." Those words landed deep, not as praise, as proof that presence matters. When I left, the streets were empty, the city humming low. I walked slowly, and I realized my old envy had been a kind of blindness. I had been jealous of a mask, and the real man under it had been fighting for his family with a steady courage I never saw. That night I promised myself, not with grand vows, but with a quiet shift inside, I would practice seeing people fully, even when the surface looked polished. Over the next months my life began to change in small measurable ways. I stopped checking Logan's profile like it was a scoreboard. I started checking my calendar like it was a promise. Tuesday nights became non-negotiable: groceries, tea, a quiet show with Claire, a late text from Logan saying he finally slept, and somewhere between the soup cans and the paperwork I learned a new skill: gratitude without comparison. At work, I asked for feedback instead of hiding. I updated my portfolio. I applied to roles I once assumed were out of reach, not because I wanted a shiny title, but because I wanted stability. I wanted to be dependable. When I got an interview, I told Logan. He sent a voice note, "Proud of you," and I felt warmth instead of defensiveness. I also began to notice my own habits, how quickly my mind guessed other people's stories. The loud coworker must be arrogant. The quiet neighbor must be unfriendly. The successful friend must be carefree. And now I caught myself. I replaced guesses with questions. Once, on the bus, I saw a man in a suit rubbing his eyes like he had not slept, and instead of thinking, "He has it easy," I wondered, who is he caring for? What is he losing? Logan and I talked more honestly, not just about his family, about mine too. I admitted I felt lost after college, like I kept starting over. He said, "Starting over is not shameful, it is brave. It means you still believe you can build something better." One Sunday we visited Noah at campus. He was taller than I remembered, excited, hopeful. He hugged Logan hard, and I saw how much Logan had protected him. Noah joked, "My brother acts like a superhero," and Logan rolled his eyes, but his smile was proud. Later Noah walked away to meet friends, and Logan said, "That right there is why I do it." He looked at me, and said, "Do you ever wonder why you envied me?" "Really?" I thought, then said, "Because I was scared my life meant less." He nodded slowly, and said, "Your life always meant something, you just needed to stop asking the wrong judge." That sentence followed me for weeks. I started journaling, not pretty quotes, just honest notes. What I did, what I felt, what I avoided. I realized envy is often grief. Grief for the life you expected, grief for the recognition you wanted, and when you name it, it softens, it stops controlling you. One day I finally got an offer for a steady job, good team, fair pay. Nothing flashy, but solid. I called Logan first, he answered while walking. I heard birds in the background. I said, "I got it," and he laughed, a big laugh, the kind I missed. He said, "That is my guy," and I felt a sudden swell of emotion, because in that moment success felt shared, not competitive. Later that week I visited Claire. She had more color in her cheeks. She teased me about my new haircut. She said, "I always liked you boys together, you balance each other," and I thought, maybe that is what friendship is, not two people racing, but two people steadying the same boat. The old me would have heard that and smirked. The new me just felt grateful, and I knew the change was real because it was quiet. It did not need applause. In August, Logan invited me to a small fundraiser at the same community center by the river. String lights, homemade cookies, local musicians playing soft songs, people laughing in gentle ways. Logan introduced me to staff. They greeted him like family. One counselor said, "Logan is here almost every month. He helps with tech, he helps with rides, he helps with paperwork." I stared at Logan, and he scratched his neck, embarrassed, like kindness was a secret hobby. Later we stood outside near the water, warm air, distant traffic. I said, "You do all this too, on top of everything," and he shrugged. He said, "When you live close to hardship, you either harden, or you decide to be useful." He looked at me, and said, "I chose useful because hard felt lonely." We watched the river for a while, then he said, "I have to admit something." He smiled, and said, "When we were younger, I envied you more than you knew." I laughed, disbelief. And he said, "You had this lightness, you could daydream, you could change your mind, you could take risks," he said. I acted confident, but I always felt like I was one mistake away from everything collapsing. He tapped his chest and said, "It makes you hungry for control, for achievement, for proof that you are doing enough." He turned to me and said, "So when people told me I was lucky, it felt absurd, but I also let it happen, because it made things simpler." I nodded, and I understood. His easy life story was armor. It kept people from asking questions he was too tired to answer, and my envy had helped hold that armor in place, because I did not look deeper. That night I met other caregivers, a woman supporting her father, a young man helping his sister, a couple balancing work and family. Their faces had the same mix of strength and exhaustion. I realized how common hidden struggle is, how rare visible kindness is. On the way home Logan said, "You know what changed the most for me this year?" I asked, "What?" And he said, "I stopped feeling alone in it." He glanced at me, and added, "You helped with that." I felt the weight of that sentence. It made my old jealous thoughts feel not just wrong, but wasteful. Weeks later, at work, a new hire joined our team, a quiet guy named Mason. People dismissed him as slow, his answers careful, his eyes often distant. The old me would have judged him, compared him, rolled my eyes. Instead I invited him to lunch. I asked how he was settling in. He hesitated, then said his partner was recovering from a serious health issue. He was juggling appointments and deadlines. I listened. I offered to swap a few shifts. I connected him with our manager for flexible hours. Nothing dramatic, just small help, the kind I had learned matters. Later Mason thanked me, and I realized, this is how change spreads, not through speeches, but through choices. The world did not suddenly become fair, success still came unevenly, but my inner world became clearer. I stopped treating other people's wins as accusations. I started treating them as invitations to learn, to ask, to support, to grow, and every time envy tried to return, I remembered the clinic smell of tea, and Logan's hands shaking around a cup, and I chose curiosity instead. By December, the city was back to rain and early darkness, the kind of season that makes people hurry. One Tuesday, I arrived with groceries and found Logan laughing with Claire, real laughter, not the performative kind. Claire waved me in, said, "Ethan, tell him he deserves rest, he never listens to me." I smiled, and I said, "Logan, your mom is right, you deserve rest." He rolled his eyes, but he listened. He sat down, he let his shoulders fall. Later, while Claire napped, Logan and I sat at the table with our tea. He said, "I got approved for a caregiver support grant through the center. It will cover a few hours a week." I said, "That is huge," and his face softened with relief. He said, "I still feel tired, but now I feel like there is a future that is not just survival." I looked at him, and I thought about the version of me from last year, the one who kept score, the one who hid insecurity behind jokes. If I could talk to that guy, I would not lecture him, I would just tell him, ask more questions. Envy is a signal, not a sentence. It points to what you value, but it lies about what others have. Logan stood up and checked on Claire, adjusting her blanket, the same gentle motion, and I realized something else. Success is not always the loud thing people clap for. Sometimes success is making tea when you are exhausted. Sometimes success is answering one more phone call, filling one more form, choosing patience one more time. Sometimes success is letting someone help you, even when you were used to doing it alone. As I walked home that night, I felt a quiet gratitude, not for my job, not for my apartment, not for any visible marker, but for the new lens I had gained. I saw strangers and wondered what they carried. I saw friends and felt warmth without measurement. I saw myself and felt less shame, because I understood that insecurity is common, but cruelty is optional. Logan and I still joke, still compete at board games, still tease each other, but underneath it there is honesty now, a deeper respect. When he has a hard week, he texts me a simple line, "Rough day," and I show up. When I feel lost, I text him, head full of noise, and he answers, take one step, then another. And because of him, because of Claire, because of the truth I finally saw, I became more careful with my thoughts. I learned that you can admire someone without shrinking yourself. You can want more for your life without resenting someone else's path. You can turn envy into fuel, not poison, by asking, what can I learn? How can I grow? How can I help? If you are listening to this and thinking of someone you envy, pause, breathe, imagine their quiet nights, and imagine your own hidden strengths too. The stories we tell ourselves about other people are often incomplete, and when we choose to learn the full story, we do not just understand them, we heal something in ourselves. That is the truth I discovered behind Logan's so-called easy life, and it changed me, for good. And now, when I hear someone say, he is so lucky, I smile, and I remember, luck is often just the part you can see.